One of the many systems added to FGO to keep characters both relevant and more powerful was the very controversial Append system. One of the original 3 Append skills included the addition of an anti-trait, allowing for servants to gain a bit of additional advantage against certain classes. For the most part, these end up being pretty useless, as you will more often than not find yourself wanting to just bring a class that properly counters. However, what these skills do that is not explicitly said is show the lore for the character. Generally, the assignment of what class a character gets a bonus against is not just arbitrary. Rather, they reflect another character's class that they oppose or have some relationship to. A good example of this is Steno, who has the anti-rider append because of her sister Medusa, allowing her to tease her more efficiently. Meanwhile, Uriel has the ever-coveted anti-berserker because she has a close relationship with Asterios. This is to say that not every append matchup is to show hostility, but rather reflect the character relationships. Additionally, on some occasions, characters will have appends that are meant to hint at the classes of future servants. Asterios, for instance, has a saber crit resistance, hinting at the release of Theseus as a saber class servant. So, today we are going to be looking into the weird and fun world of FGO's append pairings. Let's start with what should be a very easy pairing of units, Arjuna and Karna. Logic would dictate that these two would have appends to fight more efficiently against one another, but they don't. Arjuna actually has anti-berserker, very likely so that he can combat against his alter self. This is further solidified by Arjuna Alter having the archer crit resistance, though in his case this could also be a nod to William Tell in Lost Belt 4. As for Karna, he has anti-rider as his append. This one is a bit harder to parse out. On the one hand, it could be a reference to a future Pandava, but it's more likely a reference to Astolfo and Fate Apocrypha, though this is also a bit of a stretch given that he actually engages with Sieg in their final battle. A personal favorite append of mine is everyone's favorite Jarman, Douman. Douman has the very interesting anti-alter ego append. This seems somewhat out of place initially, given that very few, if any, of the Heian court characters he would like to have an advantage over are alter egos. Rather, this is an append to symbolize his relationship to his fellow disciples of the foreign god. The various disciples were initially envisioned to be alter egos, though when summoned, most of them change class. Regardless, the flavor that he wants to be able to torment his coworkers is still incredibly goofy and in character. The Koyanskaya duo is certainly a curious pair for a number of reasons, and I feel as though it's a tradition that they get included in these videos. Koyanskaya of Dark is pretty easy to understand, as she has an anti-ruler append. This can be viewed in 2 different ways. One is that it harkens back to her days as a kingdom crasher, taking many mighty rulers to their knees in order to serve her beck and call. The more likely explanation, though, is that this is meant for his most enigmatic and diligent first emperor of China, Qin Shi Huang. Having a little bit of extra bite directed at the first emperor only makes sense. However, Koyanskaya of Light is a bit more confusing. One would think that she has anti-rider for her mom Dobrynya or her slayer Taigong Wang. Instead, she has the very unusual anti-archer trait. To my recollection, there was no direct archer connections to Koyanskaya, so the only reason I can assume that she has this is due to her being a gun god, and guns, according to FGO, are just very, very advanced bows. Let's now take a moment to talk about an entire anti-class, the anti-pretenders. Let's play a game. There are only 3 units in the entire game, as of the recording of this video, that are anti-pretender. Pause the video and comment down below who you think they are. If you already know who they are, good for you. You get 1 QP. You back? Good. The only 3 anti-pretender units are Summer Tenochtitlan, Izumo no Okuni, and Madam President. Summer Tennochi makes sense because in the case of most summer servants, they get an anti-append to reflect their original class. Original Tennochi was a pretender, her summer form is anti-pretender, just makes sense. The Prez is also decently easy to explain as she is an unbeast, or someone who has removed the fake aspect tied to them and reclaimed who they were. If she can do it to herself, she can likely do it to others. Then there's Okuni. I remember that Okuni exists because I think she's cool. Me and like 7 other people. Her anti-pretender is incredibly strange, especially given the trait's rarity. My own theory as to why she has this comes down to the fact that she was historically a theater actor, someone who wears many faces and guises herself to appear in multiple roles. For this reason, I assume that she herself has experience in the class, and as a result, knows how to combat it. The anti-moon cancers are also fairly unusual. Some of these do make sense, like Bibi, Kazu, and Tamamo having roots with the moon cell, and Kuku and MHXX both being space-related. Then there are these 2 oddballs, Azumi no Isora and Daikokuten. Rewind my spiel about Okuni and apply that to Azumi no Isora as well. Those 2 make sense to a degree because they are servants that have a loose connection to the moon via the tides. They are in possession of the tidal jewels, which both raise and lower the sea levels, not dissimilar to the moon. They also have a connection to space that I won't go into here because it is a spoiler. Then there's my rats. The deity Daikokuten has no connection to the moon. In Japan, he is a god of merchants, and in his original incarnation as Mahakala, he was a war deity. This is also a good time to just let people know that the rats themselves are not not Daikokuten, but rather his servants, as rats are associated with him in Japan. This may be the key to figuring out why they have this trait. Rats are generally nocturnal creatures, so perhaps this is a carryover from the time that they were beasts, now knowing the optimal strategy to strike the moon. Moving right along, let's take a look at a trio from my favorite Fate game: Miyamoto Musashi, Miyamoto Iori, and Yamato Takeru. What all of these servants have in common is a strong desire to fight, though in different ways. In the case of Iori, his depiction in FGO has comedically portrayed him as a Goku-like figure seeking out powerful enemies to test his mettle against. However, ever true to wanting to be a samurai, he finds himself with the anti-saber Append. Though not as battle-hungry as their master, Weber was still a renowned warmonger and is in possession of quite the magical artifact as a sword. They too have the anti-saber Append. In fact, fittingly, these two likely have this Append as well, so that way they can combat against one another. Then there's the odd woman out: Musashi. You would think that after she spent an entire pseudo-singularity fighting swordsmen, an entire summer event fighting swimsuit swordsmen, and an entire game around her son and his they friend, both of whom use swords, that they would be the most likely to have the anti-saber Append. But she doesn't. She wants to hunt bigger prey, and as such has the anti-berserker Append. Seems pretty confusing, but you may be asking yourself, well, she got a berserker form for summer, right? One that's explicitly from the event where we fight swordsmen. Her original self is a saber, and since she was the big bad of the event, which had a welfare that was a saber, surely she will have the saber resistance, right? Nope, her berserker self has anti-lancer. This one makes a bit of sense if we really want to take a stretch at it, because this could be used to reflect the fact that she herself was once a saber who had a resistance against lancers, but that's just my guess. Since we're talking about characters from other Fate properties, let's talk about the extra duo, Hakuno and Hakunon. The Hakunos are directly tied to the Moon Cell, and both of them are technically the same person who summon the same servants, so there's a veritable load of options for them to pick from. Saber would be the most obvious choice, given that both Nero, Charlie, and Altera are in the Saber class in FGO. Caster could make sense because of Tamamo, or if you want to really stretch things, Rin. Archer as well because of Gilgamesh and Emiya, but the most obvious one, given their role in FGO's story as well as their own, would be Anti-Moon Cancer or Alter Ego for BB and the B-Bets respectively. But no, the Hakunos instead counter the last class I would think of: foreigners. I'm admittedly not as brushed up on my extra lore as I should be, but from what I recall, the foreigner in question does not manifest as such in FGO, assuming that we're working off of Extella and Extella Link. Finally, let's take a look at three of the most unique servants in the entire game: Angar Mainyu, Draco, and Summer Ereshkigal. The common through line for these is the beast classification, or having a connection to it. Starting with Angry Mango, he is the only 0-star servant in the game, and his Bansi allows him to do 2 times damage against beast-type enemies. However, he has the less impressive anti-caster Append. This is most likely a reference to Irisfeel, but could very well just be a reference to mages in general who seek the Holy Grail. Draco was the first summonable beast unit, and has become a fan favorite for both her design, attitude, and strength. To accompany this lofty uniqueness, we have the same Append as Angry Mango, anti-caster. Now, this one has a bit more of a bite to it than meets the eye. There's once again some obvious connections to be made, like it being designed to kill her master, who in theory would be a mage. It could be a reference to a different form of the 7 crowns that we aren't privy to, but I like to think that this is the theoretical class that Agrippina would be summoned in. If there does exist a future that Agrippina makes an appearance, 2 things are guaranteed to happen. Caligula will lose his mind, and Nero will lose her mind, though I think it's more likely that she gets a giant ghost treatment instead. Last, and certainly not least, we have the most grailed servant of 2024, Space Ereshkigal. Erish has advantage over all of the extra classes, save for the Avengers, thanks to her unique beast typing. As such, one would expect that she would have some kind of Append to complement this. Rather, she has one that, while not useless, is certainly not very effective with her Anti-Rider. Of the 3 listed here, this is the one that makes the most sense. This is very likely a prediction for a possible future Dumazid servant, manifesting in the Rider class, more than likely atop a golden sheep. Whenever they do release him, if his first ascension isn't the sheep form, I will be gravely disappointed. And that's the list for now. A little peek into the weird world of Appends. Thank you all so much for watching. Let me know who your favorite weird Append matchup is. This video was made as a reward tier for my donathon on stream, so I would like to give a special shout out to the donors: Havenwing, Hot Dough, Almighty Kurama, and Scan and Dark. Thank you for the support. I'd also like to give a thank you to my patrons over on Patreon for helping to keep the content flowing. For everyone else, do the YouTube stuff, check my links down below for the merch, the Discord, the Twitch, and my socials. But for now though, keep your chin up. Peace.